in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The afternoon sun slanted through tall windows at Eldridge Collegiate, casting long shadows across the advanced seminar classroom. Jalen Brooks took his seat near the middle, not hiding in the back, not drawing attention up front. His movements were deliberate as he arranged his materials. Notebook squared perfectly with the desk edge, 2 freshly sharpened pencils, and his father's old scientific calculator that still worked better than the fancy new ones. Around him, other students slouched in their chairs or scrolled on phones. But Jalen sat straight. He'd learned young that relaxed wasn't an option. Not for a scholarship kid, not here. His mom, Denise, had drilled that into him between hospital shifts. You have to be twice as prepared, 3 times as careful. Ms. Reyes stood at the front of the room, her presence reassuring despite the tension humming through the air. She'd been the one who'd noticed Jalen's talent first, who'd pushed for his advanced placement when others questioned if he was ready. "Class," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Today we're honored to have Dr. Grant Halverson joining us. He's a distinguished professor from the university, known for his groundbreaking work in advanced mathematics." Halverson stepped forward, tall and imposing in his tweed jacket. His silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses projected authority, but something cold lurked behind his professional smile. His eyes swept the room in a calculated arc before settling on Jalen with laser focus. "Thank you, Ms. Reyes." Halverson's voice filled the space with practiced precision. "I'm here because I believe in merit. Pure, measurable excellence. In my experience, true mathematical talent reveals itself, if we know where to look." He paused, still staring at Jalen. "Of course, proper placement is crucial. We wouldn't want anyone to feel out of their depth." A few students shifted uncomfortably. In the next row, Tasha Linwood's shoulders tensed. She'd been Jalen's lab partner last semester. She knew his work, knew how he'd solved competition problems that stumped seniors. "I understand we have quite a mix of backgrounds here," Halverson continued, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Some traditional admissions, some alternative placements. Fit becomes especially important at this level." Jalen's pencil moved across his notebook, recording every word, every inflection. His father had taught him this too, before he passed. Document everything. The margins filled with observations, not just what was said, but who nodded, who looked away, who seemed to enjoy watching others squirm. "I've reviewed some of your recent work," Halverson said, pacing slowly. "Interesting approaches. Though I wonder if everyone truly grasps the fundamentals, or if we're seeing pattern recognition without deeper understanding." More students glanced at Jalen now. They'd seen his solutions in study group, watched him work through proofs step by step, explaining each move with patience when asked. But under Halvorson's gaze, they looked down at their desks. Tasha's hand tightened around her phone. She'd started recording the moment Halvorson's tone shifted. The camera captured his practiced smirk, the way he positioned himself to loom over Jalen's desk. "Tell me, Mr. Brooks," Halverson said, "how did you find your way to this advanced track? Your previous school's curriculum seems basic." Jalen met his eyes steadily. "I solved the entrance exam problems, sir. All of them." Yes, Halverson waved dismissively. "But solving isolated problems isn't the same as belonging in a rigorous academic environment. Perhaps we should review your fundamentals to ensure you're not just lucky." "Matisse." Reyes stepped forward slightly. "Dr. Halverson, Jalen's work speaks for itself, I'm sure." Halverson cut her off smoothly. "We'll see exactly what it says next class." His smile widened as he addressed the room again. "I believe in giving everyone a fair chance to prove themselves, or to recognize when they might be better served in a different setting." Jalen's pencil moved steadily across the page, recording it all. His grip was firm but controlled, the same way he held it during competitions, during late nights at the library while his mom worked extra shifts to keep him in this school. during countless hours practicing problems from his father's old textbooks. The bell rang, and students began packing up. Halverson's voice cut through the rustling of papers. "Next class, we see who belongs." Jalen's pencil paused mid-sentence. He didn't flinch, didn't react. His hand remained steady as he finished his note, each letter precise and clear. Around him, chairs scraped and conversations resumed, but he took his time closing his notebook, aligning his pencils, tucking everything carefully into his backpack. He could feel Halverson watching, waiting for a reaction. Anger, fear, anything to prove his point. But Jalen had learned that lesson too. Never give them what they expect. He stood up slowly, shouldered his bag, and walked out with his head high. Tasha caught up to him in the hallway, phone still recording. Ms. Reyes watched from her doorway, concern etched on her face. But Jalen kept walking, his steps measured and calm. His pencil might have tightened in his grip, but his resolve was unshaken. He wasn't scared. He was ready. The next day, sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, but the atmosphere felt heavy. Dr. Halverson stood at the front, chalk in hand, his presence commanding attention. Students shifted nervously in their seats as he wrote a complex equation across the board with theatrical flourish. "Today," Halverson announced, turning to face the class, "we have a special opportunity, a chance to witness the difference between memorized formulas and genuine mathematical insight." His eyes fixed on Jalen. "Mr. Brooks, please come to the board." Jalen rose slowly, each movement deliberate. His notebook remained closed on his desk. He could feel Halverson's satisfaction at denying him this small comfort. Around him, chairs creaked as students leaned forward, tension crackling through the air. "This," Halverson gestured to the board with exaggerated reverence, "is what we call the Eldridge sequence problem. For a century, it has challenged the brightest minds in mathematics. Even full professors approach it with caution." He smiled thinly. "But perhaps our scholarship student would like to try?" The words dripped with false courtesy. Several students glanced away, uncomfortable with the obvious setup. Tasha's phone appeared quietly in her lap, angled just right to capture both the board and Halverson's face. Ms. Reyes stood near her desk, arms crossed. "Dr. Halverson, perhaps we should—" "No need for concern," he cut her off smoothly. "This is exactly the kind of rigorous assessment elite institutions require. We're simply maintaining standards." Jalen stood perfectly still at the board, facing the sprawling equation. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Math doesn't care who you are. It only cares if you're right." "No calculators," Halverson declared. "No references. No hints." He pulled out an elegant pocket watch. "And let's make it interesting. 5 minutes seems generous for such an accomplished student." The mockery in his tone made several students wince, but Jalen remained composed, studying the equation with quiet intensity. "Sir," he said, his voice steady, "may I rewrite the problem statement first, to ensure I understand it correctly?" Halverson's eyebrows rose. "By all means. Though I doubt reformatting will help with a problem that has stumped mathematicians for 100 years. Jalen picked up the chalk. His handwriting was precise as he began breaking down the equation, restructuring it into cleaner components. The class watched in silence as he worked methodically, line by line. Halfway through, he paused. His eyes narrowed slightly as he traced a particular term. "Sir, to confirm, this constraint here, it's written as greater than or equal to 0 for all positive integers." "Obviously," Halverson replied, impatience creeping into his voice. "The original notation is quite clear." Jalen nodded slowly. "Thank you." He continued writing, but something had shifted in his posture. He'd spotted something, a thread that didn't quite fit. When he finished rewriting the problem, he stepped back and studied it. The room held its breath. Halverson glanced at his watch with pointed satisfaction. 4 minutes remaining, Mr. Brooks. Perhaps you'd like to admit, this isn't the original Eldridge sequence problem, Jalen said quietly. Halverson's smile froze. "Excuse me? This is a special case," Jalen continued, his voice remaining respectful but firm. "The constraint you emphasized, it's different from the historical version. That changes the problem fundamentally." He turned to the board and began writing again, his chalk moving with quiet confidence. "In the original, this term was unbounded, but your version restricts it to non-negative integers, which means—" His hand flew across the board, laying out a clear, step-by-step proof. First, he showed how the modified constraint simplified the problem space. Then, he demonstrated why this special case was actually solvable using standard techniques. 3 minutes in, he wrote the final line of the proof and underlined it twice. The silence in the room was absolute. Students stared at the board, then at Halverson, whose face had gone rigid. Ms. Reyes's eyes shone with fierce pride. Tasha's phone kept recording as Jalen turned to face Halverson. "The special case has a clean solution," he explained calmly. "Would you like me to verify the steps?" Halverson stood frozen, staring at the board. His jaw worked silently as he searched the proof for errors, for any flaw he could exploit. Finding none, his shoulders tightened with barely controlled fury. The pocket watch ticked loudly in his hand. 4 minutes had passed. The proof stood perfect and complete, each step clearly justified. The class waited, the silence stretching thin and brittle. Finally, Halverson's voice came out clipped and strained, each word seeming to cost him physical effort. "That's correct." The classroom emptied like a draining sink, students flowing toward the door while stealing glances at the board, where Jalen's proof still stood pristine. He gathered his notebook carefully, each movement measured despite the victory humming in his chest. But before he could reach the exit, Dr. Halvorson's tall figure blocked the doorway. "Mr. Brooks," Halvorson called out, his voice carrying across the now quiet room. "A moment, please." The remaining students slowed their exit, sensing drama. Jalen turned, keeping his face neutral, despite the predatory smile spreading across Halverson's face. "That was quite a performance," Halverson said, his tone dripping with false warmth. "Almost too perfect, wouldn't you say? The notation, the structure, remarkably polished for improvisation." The word performance hung in the air like smoke. Jalen felt the shift happening, victory transforming into accusation with just a few careful words. "I solve problems step by step, sir," Jalen replied evenly. "It's how I was taught." "Taught by whom, I wonder?" Halverson's smile sharpened. "Your solution bears striking similarities to existing proofs. As Integrity Chair for the Mathematics Department at the university, I have certain obligations." Ms. Reyes stepped forward from her desk, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. "Dr. Halverson, if you're suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing," he cut her off smoothly. "I'm simply following standard procedure. Mr. Brooks, I'll need your notebook and any related materials for review. Standard protocol for maintaining academic rigor." The word rigor rolled off his tongue like a weapon. Behind Jalen, whispers rippled through the lingering students. Did he cheat? Must have copied it. Probably got help. "You know how these scholarship cases are." Tasha pushed through the crowd, phone still in hand. "That's garbage." We all watched him solve it right here. "Young lady," Halverson's voice crackled with authority, "you clearly don't understand the requirements of mathematical rigor. This isn't social media. We deal in proofs, not popularity." "Then let's discuss proof standards," Ms. Reyes interjected, her calm voice carrying steel. "Starting with why you presented a solved special case as the original unsolved problem. That seems relevant to academic integrity." Halverson's face tightened momentarily before smoothing back into professional concern. "The pedagogical reasons for my choice of problem are not the issue here. What matters is ensuring all work submitted in my classroom meets appropriate standards of originality." He held out his hand expectantly toward Jalen. "Your notebook, please. Unless there's some reason you're hesitant to have your work verified." The trap was perfect. Resist and seem guilty, comply and lose his notes. Jalen felt dozens of eyes on him, watching for any crack in his composure. He thought of his father's voice. When they try to rattle you, that's when you need your quiet strength most. With deliberate care, he opened his notebook to the relevant pages. Sir, would you like me to walk through my reasoning step by step? I can explain each. That won't be necessary, Halverson interrupted, plucking the notebook from Jalen's hands. The Integrity Committee will conduct a thorough review. We take these matters very seriously at Eldridge. The bell rang, but nobody moved. Halverson pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. Dean Rourke will need to be notified, of course. Proper channels must be followed. Then let's follow all proper channels, Ms. Reyes said, including documentation of the original problem statement, your modifications to it, and the full context of today's class. Ms. Reyes, Halverson's voice carried a warning. You're in fair treatment for all students, she replied firmly. If we're discussing academic integrity, let's be thorough. But Halvorson was already turning away, Jalen's notebook tucked under his arm. The dean's office will handle this appropriately. Mr. Brooks, I suggest you check your email promptly. The remaining students scattered as Halverson strode out, their whispers following him down the hall. Token admit. Should have known. Can't handle the standards. Each word struck like a small stone, but Jalen kept his face composed. Tasha gripped his arm. This is straight up wrong. I got the whole thing on video, which could be construed as unauthorized recording, Ms. Reyes cautioned quietly. We need to be strategic here. Jalen nodded, his stomach clenching as his phone buzzed. He pulled it out slowly, already knowing what he'd find. From Dean Colby Rourke. Subject: Urgent. Academic integrity. Concern meeting requested immediately regarding serious academic integrity concerns raised by Dr. Halverson. Please report to the dean's office at once. The words blurred slightly as Jalen stared at them. He'd solved the impossible problem perfectly, proved his brilliance beyond doubt, and none of it mattered. The system was already moving to erase his achievement, to turn his victory into proof of guilt. His mother's voice echoed in his head. Sometimes being right isn't enough, baby. Sometimes you have to be right and ready for the fight that comes after. Looking up from his phone, Jalen met Ms. Reyes' concerned gaze. The hallway had emptied except for her and Tasha, both watching him with worry etched on their faces. The classroom behind them still held his flawless proof on the board, a truth they were already working to unwrite. The dean's office corridor stretched before them like a museum hall, all polished wood and framed achievements, carefully curated to broadcast prestige. Jalen stood beside his mother, Denise Brooks, who'd left work mid-shift, still wearing her hospital support staff uniform. The contrast between her practical clothes and the office's manufactured grandeur felt deliberate, like everything else about this meeting. Ms. Reyes waited with them, her presence a quiet rebellion against the isolation they'd planned. Through the frosted glass, they could see Dean Rourke's silhouette rising from his desk as Dr. Halverson arrived, carrying a leather portfolio and Jalen's confiscated notebook. Tasha lingered further down the hall, phone hidden but ready, pretending to study. Her eyes never left the office door. Dean Rourke opened his door with practiced warmth. Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming on such short notice. Please, come in. His voice was bedroom soft, but his eyes were winter cold. He gestured them inside like a gracious host, as if they were there for tea instead of an ambush. The office smelled of leather and lemon polish. Rourke settled behind his massive desk, positioning himself as both judge and jury. Halverson took a chair to the side, arranging his materials with theatrical precision. We appreciate your prompt response to this situation, Rourke began, folding his hands. I understand Dr. Halverson has some concerns about today's class. Concerns is putting it mildly, Halverson cut in, his voice heavy with manufactured regret. I simply presented a standard challenge problem, a test of ability, nothing more. The resulting solution raised several red flags that, as an educator, I cannot ignore. Denise straightened in her chair. My son solved your problem correctly. I don't understand. Mrs. Brooks, Rourke interrupted softly. At Eldridge, we maintain extremely high standards. When a student demonstrates unexpected abilities, we have a responsibility to verify. Unexpected? Ms. Reyes's voice carried quiet steel. Jalen has consistently demonstrated exceptional mathematical insight. His work is well documented. His work pattern today deviated significantly, Halverson countered. The notation, the approach, it suggests access to external solution sources. External sources? Denise leaned forward. My boy has been solving puzzles since he could talk. His father. We understand family support is important, Rourke cut in smoothly. But scholarship positions require absolute trust. Any hint of academic impropriety— What impropriety? Ms. Reyes demanded. I'd like to see the original problem statement and Dr. Halvorson's materials. Those are protected instructional materials, Rourke replied. And this meeting isn't about the problem itself, but about maintaining academic integrity. Jalen watched the back and forth like a chess match, noting how they redirected every defense, how they transformed his achievement into evidence against him. His mother's hands were clasped tight in her lap, knuckles white. My son studies 3 hours every night, Denise tried again. He does math puzzles for fun. His father taught him to think in proofs before he even started school. William, my husband, he always said Jalen had a special mind for patterns. Mrs. Brooks, Halvorson's voice dripped false sympathy. Many parents see special gifts in their children. But at this level, we must consider all possibilities. Access to solution databases, unauthorized assistance. You have no evidence of that, Ms. Reyes interjected. The sophistication of the proof itself raises questions, Halvorson insisted. The similarity to existing approaches. Then show us these similar approaches, Ms. Reyes challenged. Present the evidence. Ms. Reyes, Rourke's tone carried a warning. This is an administrative matter. While we value faculty input, you're here as an observer only. The room felt smaller with each exchange, the air thicker. Jalen maintained his composure, watching Rourke and Halvorson trade practiced lines like they'd rehearsed this dance before. Given the seriousness of these concerns, Rourke continued, shuffling papers on his desk, we'll need to implement some interim restrictions. Pending full review, Jalen will be removed from enrichment programs and advanced placement courses. You're punishing him for being right? Denise's voice cracked slightly. We're maintaining standards while we investigate, Rourke corrected smoothly. Temporary measures only, until we can verify. Verify what? Ms. Reyes pressed. His methodology is clear. His work is shown. His work shows signs of external reference, Halvorson insisted. The proof structure closely mirrors. Mirrors what? Jalen spoke for the first time, his voice steady. I'd like to see these similar proofs. The room went quiet. Rourke and Halvorson exchanged glances. The integrity review will examine all relevant materials, Rourke said finally. For now, these precautionary measures are non-negotiable. We'll need your ID card, Jalen, to update your access levels. Denise's breath caught. Jalen could feel her tension without looking, could sense the familiar pain of watching her child face what she couldn't shield him from. This isn't right, Ms. Reyes said quietly, and this isn't over. That will be all for now, Rourke replied, standing to signal dismissal. We'll be in touch regarding next steps. They filed out of the office, each step feeling heavier than the last. In the hallway, Denise grabbed Jalen's hand, her fingers trembling slightly. They're trying to take it, she whispered, her voice thick with understanding. I know, Jalen answered, squeezing her hand back. The October sun hung cold in the sky, casting weak shadows across Eldridge Collegiate's pristine courtyard. Jalen sat alone at a concrete table, his lunch untouched before him. The isolation wasn't accidental. Empty chairs surrounded him like a moat, while clusters of students gathered at distant tables, stealing glances and whispering. Marcus Chen, his former lab partner, walked past without acknowledgement. Just yesterday, they'd been discussing quantum mechanics. Now, Jalen was invisible. 3 tables over, Jessica deliberately called out, "Hey, you!" then turned to her friend with a staged whisper, "I always forget his name." The scholarship one. The message was clear. He didn't belong here anymore. He was being erased. A folded piece of paper skidded across the concrete, stopping near his feet. Jalen didn't need to open it, but he did anyway. The words were typed, not handwritten. "Scholarship pets don't talk back." He folded it carefully and tucked it into his pocket. Evidence, like his mother taught him. Document everything. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. A shoulder slammed into his back, hard enough to jolt him forward. "Sorry," Brad Matthews sneered, not sorry at all. Then, under his breath, but loud enough to land, "Stupid." The slur hung in the air like poison. Jalen's hands clenched under the table, but his face remained neutral. He'd learned young. Showing pain only encouraged them. He gathered his things with deliberate movements, heading toward the administration building to report the incident. Mrs. Winters, the student services coordinator, listened with that particular expression Jalen was starting to recognize. Polite disbelief, wrapped in concern. "And what did you do to provoke this interaction?" she asked, pen hovering over her notepad. "I was eating lunch," Jalen replied evenly. "Alone." "There must have been some trigger," she pressed. "Brad's never had behavioral issues before." "The trigger was me solving a math problem correctly," Jalen said, maintaining eye contact. "It's documented." Mrs. Winters shifted uncomfortably. "Let's not connect unrelated incidents. I'll speak with Brad about appropriate hallway behavior." Just then, Tasha appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "I have video," she announced, "of Brad, and the note, and Jessica's little performance." Mrs. Winters straightened. "Recording other students without consent is against policy." "So is racial harassment," Tasha countered. "Want to check the handbook? I brought copies." Back in class, the pattern continued. Desks scraped away from his when he sat down. His raised hand was ignored. Someone had scratched fraud into his assigned cubby in the lab. But the real damage came through official channels. His calculus homework, previously graded as exemplary, now returned covered in red ink. "Unoriginal reasoning," Halverson had written. "Derivative approach. No specific errors marked, just vague criticisms that couldn't be disputed." "This is targeting," Ms. Reyes declared, reviewing his work after class. "Your proofs are clear and correct." Dean Rourke appeared in her doorway, as if summoned. "Ms. Reyes, a word." His tone was gentle, his meaning wasn't. "Concerns have been raised about your continued advocacy in this matter. Perhaps some professional distance would be appropriate." "Professional distance from academic integrity?" Ms. Reyes challenged. "From a sensitive investigation that doesn't directly involve you," Rourke corrected smoothly. "We wouldn't want to complicate your upcoming contract review." The threat landed. Ms. Reyes's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. Jalen's phone buzzed, his mother calling from work. Her voice carried barely controlled panic. "Baby, there's a problem. The tuition office just called. They're saying your scholarship is under review, and they need to discuss payment plans, just in case." Jalen pulled up his student portal. There it was, a new charge for $12,000, listed as contingency billing. His mother's voice cracked slightly. "I can maybe get a second job, or ask your aunt to help, but—" "No," Jalen said quietly, staring at the number. "This isn't about money. They're squeezing you to squeeze me." The courtyard had emptied now, lunch period ending. Tasha dropped into the seat across from him, her face tight with anger. "They're trying to make you quit," she said. "My cousin went through something similar at State. They push until you break, then call it voluntary withdrawal." Jalen nodded, still looking at the tuition bill. The amount wasn't random. It was carefully calculated to be just high enough to hurt, just low enough to seem reasonable to outsiders. Like everything else, the cruelty came wrapped in procedure. "The whole school's watching," Tasha continued. "Some want to help, but they're scared. Did you see how they warned Ms. Reyes?" "They're making an example," Jalen said. "Show everyone what happens when you prove them wrong." A group of students passed by, their laughter cutting off abruptly when they spotted Jalen. One whispered something, the others snickered. The sound carried across the empty courtyard like a verdict. "My mom's working double shifts already," Jalen said, his voice low but steady. "She hasn't bought new shoes in 2 years. Everything goes to my books, my uniforms, and now they're using that against her. Against us." Tasha's hand like a courtroom designed for executions. Dark wood panels absorbed what little sunlight filtered through narrow windows. 5 people sat behind a curved table that loomed over 2 simple chairs, placed there for Jalen and his mother, positioned like defendants before a firing squad. Dean Rourke occupied the center seat, fingers steepled, wearing concern like expensive cologne. To his right, Dr. Halverson leaned back with the relaxed posture of someone who'd already won. Board member Elaine Sutter, sharp in a navy blazer, studied her tablet with practiced disinterest. A young woman with a laptop sat ready to transcribe, while an empty chair waited for Ms. Reyes. "Please be seated," Rourke said, his voice carrying that particular tone of administrative sympathy that promised nothing good. "We're here to address serious concerns about academic integrity and trust within our community." Denise Brooks sat straight-backed, her work uniform still creased from her morning shift. She'd rushed straight from the hospital, not even time to change. Jalen noticed how she folded her hands to hide their trembling. "Dr. Halverson, please begin," Rourke directed. Halverson rose, straightening his tie. "What we witnessed in that classroom was clearly performative. A theatrical display meant to undermine authority and disrupted the learning environment." "By solving the problem correctly?" Denise asked, her voice level but sharp. "By displaying knowledge that no student at this level could reasonably possess," Halverson countered. "The problem I presented contained a subtle variation, a disguised special case that even graduate students regularly miss. Yet somehow, in 5 minutes, without resources or assistance," he let the implication hang. Miss Reyes arrived then, slightly breathless. "I apologize for the delay. I was gathering relevant documentation." "Please take your seat, Ms. Reyes," Rourke interrupted. "We're maintaining orderly procedure." Sutter cleared her throat. "I think we need to address the larger context. Eldridge Collegiate has a culture of excellence, built over generations. Our standards aren't just about correct answers. They're about character, about fitting into established traditions." She turned to Denise. "You should appreciate the opportunity your son has been given here." Denise's fingers tightened. "Opportunity? My son earned his place. His father taught him mathematics before he could read. He solves proof problems for fun. He—" "Mrs. Brooks," Rourke cut in, "please maintain an appropriate tone." "Tone?" Denise's voice cracked slightly. "My son solved a problem perfectly, and you're treating him like a criminal." "We're simply seeking clarity," Rourke said smoothly. "Dr. Halverson has serious concerns about the authenticity of Jalen's work." "Miss Ew." Reyes raised her hand. "May I speak to the actual mathematical substance? The key fact we're dancing around is that Dr. Halverson presented a solved problem as unsolved, then accused a student of cheating for seeing through the deception." "That's not the issue under discussion," Rourke deflected. "We're focused on—" "Why won't you examine Dr. Halverson's original materials?" Ms. Reyes pressed. "The problem statement, his source documents, those materials are protected intellectual property," Halverson snapped. "The issue here is conduct and trust." "Exactly," Sutter agreed. "This isn't about one problem. It's about respect for institution and authority." Jalen had been silent, watching, documenting every word and reaction in his mind. Now he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "May I explain my method?" Rourke nodded magnanimously. "Please do." I check assumptions first. Always. My father taught me that. When I saw the problem, I noticed the constraints didn't match the structure. It's like a puzzle piece that looks right but doesn't quite fit. Jalen pulled out his notebook. I can show you my work, step by step. I use timed drills to practice, so working under pressure isn't new to me. Very polished, Halverson interrupted. Almost rehearsed, wouldn't you say? Are you suggesting my son prepared to be publicly ambushed? Denise demanded. Mrs. Brooks, please, Rourke warned. This hostile tone isn't helpful. Ms. Reyes tried again. If we could just review the original problem statement. I believe we have sufficient information, Rourke declared. He shuffled some papers, though everyone knew this moment had been scripted from the start. Given the serious nature of these concerns and our responsibility to maintain academic standards, we are implementing a temporary scholarship suspension pending final review. The color drained from Denise's face. Her hands stopped trembling, going completely still. The stillness of someone absorbing a fatal blow. This isn't a final determination, Rourke continued, his voice dripping false comfort. Simply a precautionary measure while we complete our investigation. The bursar's office will contact you about payment arrangements. Payment arrangements? Denise whispered. For a scholarship my son earned? Because he solved a problem too well? Because we must ensure all students meet our standards of conduct and character, Sutter corrected primly. Jalen watched his mother's face, saw the weight of every double shift, every sacrificed necessity, every dream she'd fought to keep alive for him. In that moment, he understood exactly what they were doing. This wasn't about math or merit or even money. This was about power, about breaking not just him, but everyone who believed in him. The young note-taker's fingers hovered over her keyboard, waiting to transcribe whatever came next. The narrow windows cast long shadows across the hearing room's dark panels, like bars closing in. The kitchen light flickered overhead as Denise Brooks stood at the counter, sorting through a stack of envelopes with trembling hands. Bills, past due notices, and now the official scholarship suspension letter from Eldridge Collegiate. Her shoulders sagged as she read the carefully worded paragraphs that spelled out financial devastation. Jalen sat at their small kitchen table, rereading his own copy for the 10th time. The words hadn't changed. Temporary suspension of all financial assistance pending investigation. The formal language couldn't hide the threat beneath. $2,000, Denise whispered, her voice cracking. They want $2,000 by next week just to keep you enrolled while they review the case. She slumped into a chair, spreading the bills across the worn tablecloth. Plus, rent's due, and they raised it again. Jalen watched his mother's fingers trace the numbers, doing the math they both already knew. Her hospital job paid steady, but not enough. Not for this. I can pick up extra shifts, Denise said, more to herself than to him. Maybe Karen in pediatrics will trade some weekends. Mom, no. You're already working 60 hours. 70 next week, she corrected, pulling out her phone to check her schedule. If I take the overnight rotation, that's differential pay. And if I skip lunch breaks, this is my fault, Jalen said quietly. If I hadn't solved that problem. Don't you dare. Denise's hand slammed down on the table, making the bills jump. Don't you dare blame yourself for being brilliant. Her eyes blazed with sudden fury, but not at him. They're punishing you by starving us, making us hurt so you'll break. Making me watch my son suffer, because he had the nerve to be smarter than they expected. She stood up and walked to the small jewelry box on the windowsill, the one that held her mother's wedding ring, a pair of pearl earrings from Jalen's father, and the gold chain she'd saved 3 months to buy herself when she got her nursing certification. Her just-in-case fund, she called it. Mom, please don't. We need the lights on, she said flatly. Need the internet for your homework. Need food. She picked up the box with shaking hands. Things are just things. At school the next day, the whispers followed Jalen through the halls. A guidance counselor accidentally left his file open during a student meeting, and by lunch, everyone knew. The scholarship kid was under investigation. "Hey, fraud!" someone called out as Jalen walked to his locker. "Daddy's money run out?" "Nah," another voice answered. "Can't run out what you never had." Jalen kept his face neutral, his steps measured. He'd learned early. Reaction was what they wanted. Every flinch was fuel. In calculus, Halverson had evolved from open hostility to something worse, performative concern. "I'm worried about the similarity between your latest proof and certain online sources," he announced, loud enough for the whole class to hear. "Perhaps we should discuss your research methods." "My work is original," Jalen said quietly. "I can explain every step." "Can you?" Halverson's smile was razor-thin. "Like you explained that miraculous 5-minute solution." After class, Ms. Reyes pulled Jalen aside. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from fighting battles you couldn't win alone. "They're building a paper trail," she said softly. "Every similarity, every concern. It's not random. They're creating a pattern to justify what they've already decided." She glanced down the hall, then lowered her voice further. "We need more than unfairness, Jalen. We need proof of intent. Proof that this was targeted, deliberate." That night, Jalen sat on his bed, surrounded by textbooks and notification letters. The landlord's warning about late rent lay crumpled by his feet. His mother's jewelry box sat empty on the dresser, its contents now converted to utility payments and grocery money. He pulled out his father's old notebook, worn leather, pages dog-eared from years of late-night study sessions. His father had been a factory electrician who loved pure mathematics, who taught himself calculus between midnight shifts, who filled margins with elegant proofs and patient explanations for his son. The notebook fell open to a page marked with a faded sticky note. His father's handwriting flowed across the paper. "When the problem seems impossible, check your assumptions. Truth hides in the details they don't want you to see." Jalen traced the words with his finger, feeling the indentations left by his father's pen. "Teach me how to fight this," he whispered to the empty room. "Show me what they don't want me to see." From the kitchen, he could hear his mother on the phone, voice tight as she negotiated with the billing department. Another overtime shift. Another missed dinner. Another piece of their life carved away because he'd had the audacity to be right. The notebook pages rustled as he turned them, each one filled with his father's patient methodology. Step by step. Assumption by assumption. Proof by careful proof. His father had fought his own battles with systems that wanted him small, and he'd left behind more than just mathematics. He'd left a blueprint for surviving with dignity. The fluorescent lights hummed steadily in the public library's records room as Jalen sat across from Mr. Ellison Vance, a retired archivist whose wire-rimmed glasses and weathered hands spoke of decades spent protecting truth between paper walls. Ms. Reyes stood nearby, her posture tense but hopeful. "So," Vance said, studying them both, "you want to know about Dr. Halvorson's special unsolved problem." He didn't make air quotes, but his tone did it for him. His eyes, sharp behind those old glasses, held the weary knowledge of someone who'd watched too many stories get buried. "We need to understand what really happened," Ms. Reyes explained. "The problem he used, its history, its weapons," Vance finished, nodding slowly. "Because that's what files become in the wrong hands. Weapons!" He pushed back from the table and walked to a filing cabinet, his movements deliberate. First lesson of archives: nothing's ever truly lost, just conveniently misplaced. Jalen watched as Vance pulled out several boxes of old Mathematical Association bulletins. The man's fingers moved with practiced precision, flipping through yellowed pages with the care of someone who knew exactly what damaged paper could do, both present and missing. "Here," Vance said, placing a bulletin from 1973 on the table. "The famous unsolved problem you mentioned. Except," he tapped a footnote with his finger. "Notice anything?" Jalen leaned forward, reading carefully. His eyes widened. "It mentions a solved special case." The exact structure Dr. Halverson used in class. Precisely. Vance's mouth tightened. Not so legendary after all, is it? At least, not that version. Ms. Reyes drew in a sharp breath. He presented it as completely unsolved. Made a show of it being impossible. Because that served his purpose, Vance said, pulling out more records. Now, let's look at the access logs. He spread out sheets showing faculty checkout records. Dates, times, materials requested. Patterns emerged like shadows under sunset. Halverson's name appearing again and again, checking out old proof packets and contest materials. See these clusters? Vance pointed to several dates. Heavy activity, then nothing, until his finger moved to another date. He starts again, right before he begins his visiting professor tours at prep schools. Jalen felt his heart pound as the pieces aligned. He wasn't preparing lectures. No, Vance agreed grimly. He was building ammunition, collecting problems with specific properties, things that look harder than they are, or easier than they seem, perfect for public demonstrations. Ms. Reyes paced the small room, her heels clicking against the linoleum. He needed material that could serve two purposes, she said, thinking out loud. Problems that would let him control the narrative either way. Like a prosecutor who plants evidence, Vance nodded. If the defendant finds it, they're guilty of tampering. If they miss it, they're guilty of the crime. Jalen stared at the documents spread before them. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Check your assumptions. He wasn't testing me, he said quietly. He was trapping me. If you failed to solve it, Ms. Reyes continued, he proves his placement doubts were justified. And if you succeeded, Vance added, he had a ready-made accusation of cheating. Because how could you solve something impossible unless you had help? The room felt smaller suddenly, the weight of institutional machinery pressing in on all sides. Vance moved to another cabinet, pulling out more files with practiced efficiency. Look here, he said, showing them a series of correspondence logs. Halverson's requests for student records, always focused on certain demographics, always before his guest lectures. The old archivist's voice carried decades of controlled anger. He's done this before. Ms. Reyes examined the dates and locations. All elite prep schools, all with scholarship programs, all with students he could target, Jalen finished. The word tasted bitter. Vance nodded, his movements becoming more urgent as he pulled additional files. Academic bureaucracy runs on paper, he explained. Forms, requests, approvals. People like Halverson count on most folks never checking the trail, never connecting the dots. They spent the next hour documenting everything. Ms. Reyes photographed records with her phone, while Jalen took careful notes, marking dates and reference numbers. How to make truth too solid to deny. Remember, Vance said, his voice carrying the weight of experience, institutions protect themselves by making truth seem complicated. By the time you prove one thing, they've buried you in process about another. So we prove it all at once, Jalen said, looking at their growing pile of evidence. Every step, every pattern. His pencil moved steadily across his notebook, mapping connections. Show the whole trap, not just the parts they want to debate. Ms. Reyes stopped her photography, a sudden realization crossing her face. That's why he panicked when you solved it so quickly, she said. You didn't just solve the math, you exposed his method. 5 minutes was too fast for him to control the story. Vance began carefully returning files to their proper places, but his eyes stayed sharp, focused. Systems like this thrive on isolation, he said. They want each case to feel unique, disconnected. That's why they hate paper trails. Evidence makes patterns visible. Jalen looked at his notes, at the photographs, at the documented history of Halverson's movements through academia. Each piece alone could be explained away. Together, they told a story that no amount of institutional polish could hide. Then we show the trap, Jalen said, his voice steady and clear in the quiet room. The fluorescent lights in Eldridge Collegiate's hallway cast harsh shadows as Jalen walked toward the administrative office again. His shoulders stayed straight, but exhaustion crept into his steps. This was the third time this week they'd pulled him from class for just a few questions. Tasha leaned against the wall outside, her phone clutched tight like a shield. Her eyes met Jalen's with a mix of anger and worry. "They're doing it on purpose," she whispered as he passed, "making you miss the hard parts of each lesson." Jalen nodded slightly. He'd figured that out after the second interruption happened, right before a crucial calculus explanation. Now it was becoming a pattern. Every time an important concept was scheduled, someone needed to clarify something about his case. Mr. Klein, the hall monitor, hovered nearby with his clipboard and permanent frown. "No loitering," he barked at Tasha. "Move along." Inside the office, more papers waited. More forms. More carefully worded accusations disguised as concerns. Jalen's hand cramped from signing statements about things that never happened. When he finally returned to his locker between classes, something white caught his eye. A note had been shoved through the vent slots. He pulled it out, his stomach tightening as he read the words scrawled in heavy black marker. "You're not one of us." The paper crumpled in his fist. Without thinking, he tore it down. The sound of ripping paper oddly satisfying in the quiet hallway. "Hey!" Mr. Klein's voice cracked like a whip. "What are you doing to school property?" "Someone put this—" Jalen started to explain, holding up the crumpled note. "I saw you damaging that locker," Klein cut him off, already writing on his disciplinary pad. "That's vandalism." "But I didn't—" "Take this to Dean Rourke." Klein thrust the pink slip at him. "And don't try to play victim. I saw what I saw." Down the hall, students hurried past, careful not to make eye contact. A few weeks ago, they'd been study partners, project teammates. Now they treated him like he had something contagious. Tasha tried to rally support during lunch. "Come on," she urged a group of their former friends. "You all saw what happened in class that day." Halverson set him up. "Sorry," mumbled one girl, gathering her things. "I can't risk my college recommendations." Another boy shrugged uncomfortably. "Maybe if you had actual proof." "We were all there." Tasha's voice rose in frustration. "Please keep it down," a lunch monitor warned, "or you'll need to leave." The pressure kept building. Halvorsen submitted a formal letter to the board, requesting Jalen's removal from the school entirely. The language was careful, professional. Concerns about academic integrity and institutional standards. But the meaning was clear. Get rid of the problem student. Board member Elaine Sutter backed him immediately. "We must protect the Eldridge brand," she wrote in her response. "Questions about our academic rigor could impact donations and university partnerships." The attacks spread beyond school walls. Denise called Jalen during his study period, her voice tight with worry. "My supervisor wanted to talk about our family situation today," she said. "Said they've been getting calls asking about my reliability, given everything that's happening with you at school." "Mom, I'm so sorry." "Don't you dare apologize," she cut him off fiercely. "You didn't do anything wrong. They're the ones who should be sorry." But sorry wasn't in their vocabulary. Instead, they had concerns and procedures and endless ways to make life harder without ever saying why. Meanwhile, Mrs. Reyes worked quietly behind the scenes, following a hunch. She caught up with Tommy Chen, one of the school's IT staff, while he was updating classroom computers. "Quick question about the recording systems," she said casually. "For the academic integrity review, how long do we keep security footage?" Tommy glanced around before answering. "Official policy says 30 days for most stuff, but the system actually saves everything to a backup server for much longer. Most people don't know that part." "Including the classroom cameras? And hallway feeds?" He nodded. "Everything. The automatic archiving runs independently. Administrators think old files delete automatically, but—" He shrugged. "Technology, right?" Ms. Reyes kept her voice steady. "So hypothetically, If someone needed to verify what happened in a specific class, the truth is still there, Tommy said quietly. Buried in the server room. Some footage stays way longer than they admit. The bell rang, sending students rushing through the halls. Jalen emerged from another review meeting, looking drained. His notebook was full of defensive documentation. Times, dates, witnesses, but the system kept finding new ways to exhaust him. Mr. Klein watched him pass, already writing on his clipboard. Another day, another set of infractions, another piece of paper designed to prove a point. You don't belong here. But they didn't know about the cameras, about the servers quietly recording everything, about the truth they thought they could bury under paperwork and policy. The Brooks apartment felt smaller tonight, squeezed by the weight of unpaid bills and broken dreams. Denise sat at their tiny kitchen table, her work uniform still on, staring at nothing. Her hands trembled slightly as she held another overdue notice. The red stamp across it screamed, "Final warning." Jalen stood by the window, clutching a different piece of paper. A demand from the scholarship office for immediate payment. The amount might as well have been $1 million. They didn't have it. Wouldn't have it. I lost 6 hours this week, Denise said, her voice hollow. Because of that meeting with Dean Rourke. My supervisor said they can't keep adjusting the schedule for my personal issues. She laughed, but it came out wrong. Personal issues. That's what they call fighting for my son's future. Jalen's throat tightened. Mom! Don't. She shook her head. Don't apologize. Not for being brilliant. Not for proving them wrong. Her voice cracked. Not for being exactly who your father knew you could be. The mention of his father made Jalen's chest ache. He thought about the old notebooks, filled with careful proofs and patient explanations. What would his dad say about this mess? About watching truth get crushed under institutional boots? Ms. Hendricks called from the rental office, Denise continued. She said they've been more than accommodating, but they need the full amount by Friday. She pressed her fingers to her temples. I asked my supervisor for extra shifts to make it up. You know what she said? That they're reevaluating staff reliability. The words hung in the air like poison. Reliability. Such a clean way to say they were punishing her for defending her son. The final review is tomorrow, Jalen said quietly. Rourke made it clear. They're looking to make an example. He didn't add what they both knew. Expulsion would make the scholarship recovery immediate. Full tuition would come due instantly. Denise's shoulders slumped. Maybe we should start looking at other schools, other cities even. The defeat in her voice hit Jalen like, run away? The words tasted bitter. Let them win? Sometimes surviving is winning, baby. Denise's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Your father, he fought so hard, was so brilliant. And they still... She stopped, swallowing hard. Sometimes the system is bigger than being right. Jalen looked down at his latest calculus test. Every answer was correct, proven step by step. Halverson had still marked it with a failing grade, adding comments like derivative work and suspicious methodology. The red ink felt like violence. A knock at the door made them both jump. Denise wiped her eyes quickly, straightening her uniform as she went to answer. Ms. Reyes stood in the hallway, flanked by Mr. Vance and Tasha. All three carried folders and laptops. Their expressions held something Jalen hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. Sorry to come so late, Ms. Reyes said, but this couldn't wait. They spread their materials across the kitchen table. Mr. Vance pulled out a stack of technical documents while Tasha booted up her laptop. The school's security system does more than just monitor, Ms. Reyes explained. It archives everything, including classroom footage and hallway audio. But Rourke said all recordings were automatically deleted. Denise frowned. That's what they think happens, Vance said with a small smile. But the backup server keeps running independently. Tommy in IT showed us. There's a separate archive that administrators don't access. Everything from that day is still there. Including Halverson's original problem statement, Tasha added. The whole setup is recorded. Him selecting Jalen, changing the constraints, everything. And that's not all, Ms. Reyes continued. We found the original publication, where Halverson first encountered this unsolved problem. It wasn't unsolved at all. He knew about the special case solution. He deliberately presented it wrong to set Jalen up. Denise sank into a chair. You can prove it? With timestamps, metadata, and full audio, Vance confirmed. They can't claim it was edited or manipulated. The system logs will show it's untouched archival footage. The hallway cameras caught everything too, Tasha said, including Mr. Klein selectively enforcing rules and ignoring when other students harassed Jalen. Plus, all those random bag searches that only seemed to target him. Jalen stared at the stack of evidence growing on their table. Proof. Real, undeniable proof of everything they'd done. Every calculated move, every manufactured crisis, every deliberate attempt to break him down and force him out. If we get this, he said slowly, looking at the possibility of justice laid out before them, they can't lie anymore. The library's back office hummed with fluorescent lights and the soft whir of computer fans. Ms. Reyes approached Tommy, the tech staffer, while Jalen, Tasha, and Mr. Vance waited near a row of filing cabinets trying to look casual. I need to review some curriculum materials, Ms. Reyes said carefully, placing her department ID on Tommy's desk. Specifically from Dr. Halverson's guest lectures. Tommy glanced at her ID, then at the others. His fingers drummed against his keyboard. Curriculum review, huh? He didn't sound convinced. Like how they reviewed my budget request 6 times before denying basic security updates? The administration has their priorities, Ms. Reyes said diplomatically. Yeah, protecting certain people while throwing others under the bus. Tommy's eyes flickered to Jalen. Give me a minute. His fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through folders and submenus. Fun fact about our automatic deletion policy. It's mostly for show. The backup server keeps running independently. Administrators don't even know how to access it properly. The first video file opened on his screen. The seminar room appeared, filled with students. Dr. Halverson stood at the front, commanding attention. The timestamp showed the exact day everything changed. Full audio and video, Tommy explained. Multiple camera angles. They watched as Halverson began his performance. The crystal-clear footage caught every detail. His theatrical flourish at the board. The way he positioned himself to control the room. How he denied Jalen basic tools while setting his trap. Volume up here, Tommy said, adjusting the settings. Halverson's voice filled the small office. Perhaps our scholarship students should demonstrate real mathematical rigor. The sneer in his tone was unmistakable. They saw Jalen approach the board, calm and focused. The camera caught the exact moment he spotted the disguised special case. The slight pause, the careful verification, then the methodical solution that exposed Halverson's deception. But it was what happened after class that made them all lean forward. As students filed out, the camera picked up Halverson's muttered words. He wasn't supposed to see that. The admission hung in the air, damning in its clarity. Wait, Tommy said, pulling up another file. There's more. A new clip showed the cafeteria hallway the following day. Halverson and Mr. Klein stood near the lunch line, heads close together. Though their voices were low, the directional microphones caught fragments. Needs to learn his place. Handle the scholarship situation. Spread the word quietly. Mr. Vance pulled out a stack of academic journals, spreading them across Tommy's desk. Here's the proof about the unsolved problem. He pointed to highlighted passages. The special case solution was published decades ago. Halvorsen knew exactly what he was doing when he presented it as impossible. Tasha unzipped her backpack, removing a folder stuffed with handwritten statements. I've got 12 students who heard Halverson call Jalen a placement problem in private conversations. 5 more who saw Klein ignore the harassment. 3 who witnessed Halverson deliberately marking correct answers wrong. Ms. Cithi Reyes studied the video footage again, her expression hardening. Tommy, Can you verify the metadata? Show these haven't been altered? Already on it. He pulled up technical logs and timestamps. Everything's authenticated. The system automatically generates verification hashes. They can't claim tampering. Denise Brooks had been silent until now, watching the evidence pile up. Her hands trembled as she touched the screen, frozen on an image of Halverson's satisfied smirk after filing the plagiarism complaint. "They almost destroyed us," she whispered. "All those meetings, the concerns about Jalen's character, the sudden fees." Her voice cracked. "I was working double shifts, selling everything we had, thinking maybe we'd done something wrong. And it was all because this man couldn't stand being proved wrong by my son." Jalen put his hand on his mother's shoulder. "We kept every receipt," he said quietly. "Every late fee notice, every scholarship warning, every piece of documentation showing how they tried to break us financially." Mr. Vance nodded grimly. "The pattern is clear. First academic intimidation, then manufactured integrity charges, followed by systematic harassment and economic pressure. All because a student solved a problem he wasn't supposed to see." "Tommy," Ms. Reyes asked, "can we get copies of all this?" "Better." He reached under his desk and pulled out an external hard drive. "I've been archiving everything since I noticed the targeting pattern. Full video, audio, system logs, metadata, all properly timestamped and authenticated. Plus, backup copies stored off-site, just in case someone tries to accidentally delete anything." Tasha started organizing the evidence into categories: academic harassment, administrative collusion, financial retaliation, witness statements. Each piece strengthened the others, forming an undeniable picture of orchestrated persecution. "They thought they could bury this," Ms. Reyes said, "hide behind policy and procedure, while they punished excellence they couldn't control." Jalen looked at the screens, the papers, the proof that transformed their private nightmare into documented fact. His voice was steady as he said, "Now we flip it." Ms. Reyes met his eyes and nodded firmly. "Now we demand consequences." The community legal office smelled like coffee and paper. Sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting stripes across the conference table where Alyssa Monroe spread out their evidence in precise rows. Her fingers traced each document, with the precision of someone who'd turned countless injustices into airtight cases. "Walk me through the timeline again," she said, uncapping a red pen. "Every detail matters." Jalen spoke with the same methodical clarity he'd used to solve Halverson's trap. He explained how the professor had presented the problem, denied basic tools, then pivoted to accusations when the solution emerged. Ms. Reyes added context about the academic integrity process, while Vance supplied documentation about the problem's true history. Alyssa's pen moved steadily, mapping connections. "This isn't random cruelty," she said. "It's systematic retaliation masked as procedure. They're using integrity as a weapon." She lifted the video screenshots Tommy had provided. "The timing is crucial. Halverson makes the accusation immediately after being proved wrong. That's not investigation. That's punishment for success." Denise's hands twisted in her lap. "They made us feel crazy. Like we were wrong for questioning anything." "Classic institutional gaslighting," Alyssa replied, her voice steady but fierce. "They count on people doubting themselves when authority figures abuse power politely." She spread out the financial documents next: late notices, fee warnings, scholarship suspension letters. This is where they got sloppy. They created a clear paper trail of economic pressure, triggered by a baseless academic complaint. Mizoons. Reyes pulled out her own documentation. Emails warning her to stop over-advocating. Grade comparison sheets showing the pattern of bias. Meeting notes where concerns were raised and ignored. "I'll need your formal statement," Alyssa told her. "Your position as a department teacher witnessing this matters." "They'll try to discredit me," Ms. Reyes said. "Call me biased or unprofessional. Let them." Alyssa's smile was sharp. Every attack on a witness who speaks up strengthens our case about their patterns of retaliation. Vance laid out his research next. Academic journals, his research next. Academic journals, published solutions, and archived records proving Halverson's legendary unsolved problem was actually a known special case with existing proofs. This is crucial, Alyssa said, studying the dates. He didn't just set up a student to fail, he falsified the academic premise to do it. That's misconduct beyond the classroom. Tasha's contribution came in a thick folder. Documented incidents of racial harassment, witness statements about selective enforcement, and screenshots of threatening messages other students had received for speaking up. They created a hostile environment, Alyssa explained, then punished the targets for reacting to it. Classic discrimination tactic: provoke, then police the response. She began drafting the formal complaint, her keyboard clicks sharp and decisive. We're demanding an external investigation, not their hand-picked panel, not their internal review. Independent experts who can't be pressured by donors or administrators. The morning light shifted across the table as she outlined their demands. Immediate reinstatement of Jalen's academic standing, restoration of his scholarship, removal of all disciplinary notations, and a full inquiry into both Halverson's conduct and the administration's handling of complaints. What about the university partner? Ms. Reyes asked. They're connected to the school. They're both getting notice, Alyssa replied. The liability extends up the chain. If they knew about discrimination and helped hide it, they share responsibility. She turned to Jalen, her expression serious. Here's what matters now. We let the evidence speak. No rants, no begging, no emotional appeals they can dismiss. We force them to answer specific charges with specific facts. Denise straightened in her chair, hope finally replacing exhaustion. You really think we can win? We already have the truth, Alyssa said. Now we're just making them face it officially. She began assembling the filing package. Verified copies of the video footage, authenticated academic references, witnessed statements, financial records, and a detailed timeline connecting every retaliatory action to Jalen's exposure of Halverson's deception. The beauty of paper trails, she explained, is that they outlast convenient excuses. They can't claim confusion when we have timestamps. They can't argue good faith when we have their own words recorded. Mr. Vance nodded appreciatively. You're building a cage of documentation. Exactly. Alyssa tabbed another section. Every piece supports the others. The video proves the setup. The academic records prove the deception. The financial documents prove the punishment. The witness statements prove the pattern. She handed Denise a tissue, noticing the tears starting. It's okay to be angry. What they did was wrong. But now we have proof, and proof doesn't care about their power structure. Ms. Reyes studied the draft complaint. They'll fight back hard. Of course they will. Alyssa's voice held steel. But every aggressive response, every attempt to discredit witnesses, every refusal to address specific evidence, it all reinforces our core argument about how they operate. The final stack of papers settled into order with a satisfying thump. Alyssa looked at each person around the table, these witnesses to injustice who'd refused to stay silent. She turned to Jalen last, seeing in him both the wound of what was done and the strength of what remained unbroken. We filed today, she said simply. The administrative corridor felt different today. Its polished floors and wood-paneled walls no longer projected authority. They felt like cheap theater props, a staged backdrop for power games about to collapse. Dean Colby Rourke stood outside the conference room, adjusting his tie with fingers that weren't quite steady. He'd received the meeting notice an hour ago, and its formal language had set off warning bells. When he saw Jalen Brooks approaching with his mother and an unfamiliar woman in a crisp suit, those bells became sirens. Dean Rourke, Alyssa Monroe said, extending her business card with precision. I'm representing the Brooks family in this matter. Shall we begin? The change was instant. Rourke's practiced smile flickered like a faulty light. He'd seen that look before. Attorneys who specialized in institutional accountability had a way of making friendly facades crack. Inside the conference room, Dr. Halverson already sat waiting, his usual commanding presence diminished by uncertainty. The tech staff had set up a projector, and Mr. Vance occupied a corner chair, surrounded by reference materials. "Before we start," Rourke said, reaching for his familiar soothing tone, "I want to emphasize our commitment to fair." "Let's focus on specifics," Alyssa interrupted, opening her laptop. "We have footage from the seminar where Dr. Halverson presented what he called an unsolved century-old problem to my client." The projection screen lit up with crystal-clear video. There was Halverson, performing for the class, his theatrical flourishes now looking orchestrated rather than spontaneous. The audio captured every word, every inflection, every subtle barb wrapped in academic language. "Note the timestamp," Alyssa continued. "The metadata has been verified by independent technical experts." Halverson shifted in his chair. "This is clearly a matter of interpretation." "Is it?" Alyssa pulled up a split screen. "On the left, we have your presentation of the problem. On the right, we have published references from 1987, 1992, and 2003, all showing this specific case was solved decades ago. Mr. Vance?" The retired archivist lifted a bound volume. "The special case Dr. Halverson presented as unsolved appears in multiple mathematics journals. It's well documented as a teaching example for advanced students." "That's not," Halverson started, but Alyssa was already playing the damning audio clip captured after class. "He wasn't supposed to see that." The words hung in the air like smoke. Rourke's face tightened as he recognized the voice unmistakably as Halverson's. "Perhaps there's been a miscommunication," Rourke attempted, falling back on institutional language. "We should focus on moving forward constructively. Let's discuss constructive responses." Alyssa laid out a timeline of financial documents. "Following this incident, you suspended Mr. Brooks's scholarship without evidence of misconduct. The resulting economic pressure nearly forced his family from their home. We have the late notices, the utility warnings, and Mrs. Brooks's reduced work schedule from mandatory meetings you demanded." Denise straightened in her chair, her dignity a rebuke to their assumptions. Outside in the hallway, voices carried. Students passing between classes, catching glimpses through the conference room's windows. The whispers started immediately, spreading like wind through dry grass. "Did you see? That's Jalen's lawyer. I heard they have proof Halverson lied." The problem wasn't even unsolved. Halverson's face had gone pale. His reputation, built on decades of carefully managed prestige, was unraveling in real time. The students who had avoided Jalen were now avoiding looking at Halverson. A knock at the door introduced Ms. Reyes, followed by two other staff members, Mr. Chen from the math department at Roosevelt Prep, and Dr. Watson from City Academic. They carried additional folders. "We have statements," Ms. Reyes said quietly, "documenting similar incidents at other schools." "This is highly irregular," Rourke protested, but his voice had lost its authority. "What's irregular," Alyssa replied, "is a celebrated professor using fraudulent academic claims to target a student, then weaponizing institutional processes when his deception was exposed." She laid out more evidence. Grade comparisons showing the sudden harsh marking of Jalen's work, surveillance footage of Halverson meeting with other staff members just before random misconduct reports, and a comprehensive record of every retaliatory action. Disguised as standard procedure, the weight of documentation transformed the room. Each piece of evidence stripped away another layer of deniability, another excuse, another administrative shield. Rourke's attempts to minimize the situation died in his throat, as Alyssa methodically connected every dot. Students weren't the only ones watching now. Other faculty members found reasons to pass by, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock as they pieced together what was happening. The story crystallized in real time. Jalen Brooks hadn't cheated. He'd exposed a fraud and paid the price for being right. Alyssa closed her laptop with a decisive click. We expect the district will want to handle this appropriately. An external inquiry seems necessary, given the scope of misconduct and the pattern of institutional retaliation. Rourke looked at his watch, then the door, then his hands. The practiced responses failed him. Behind him, Halverson sat motionless, watching decades of carefully constructed authority dissolve under the weight of simple truth. Within hours, the district superintendent's office issued a statement. An independent investigation would begin immediately. Dr. Halverson's position and past work would undergo comprehensive review. The scholarship suspension was reversed, with full back payment and damages. The assembly hall buzzed with suppressed energy. Morning light streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes that danced above rows of wooden seats. Students filed in with the shuffling uncertainty of people who sensed a shift in the air, but couldn't name it. At the front, administrators huddled near the podium, their whispered conversations carrying notes of strain. Dr. Margaret Chen, the independent math reviewer brought in during the investigation, stood apart from them. Her presence represented external oversight they couldn't control, and their discomfort showed in tight shoulders and forced smiles. Jalen sat with his mother in the front row, his posture relaxed but alert. The past weeks had taught him to read rooms differently, to notice the small tells that revealed power struggling to maintain its grip. Beside him, Tasha kept glancing at her phone, documenting everything with the same watchful intensity that had captured crucial moments before. Ms. Reyes entered through the side door, carrying a folder that made the administrators stiffen. They'd learned to fear paperwork lately. Every document seemed to expose another crack in their careful facade. She nodded to Jalen with quiet pride, then took her place near Dr. Chen. The Northern Regional Mathematics Competition, Dean Rourke announced from the podium, his voice carrying that artificial warmth that meant he was reading carefully vetted words, represents the highest level of academic achievement. Eldridge has a proud tradition. Represents the highest level of academic achievement. Eldridge has a proud tradition. Jalen noticed how Rourke avoided looking directly at him. The dean's hands gripped the podium edges too tightly, betraying the strain of maintaining appearances while under investigation. The school's reputation hung by threads, and everyone knew it. Dr. Chen stepped forward next, and the energy shifted. She spoke with the clear authority of someone who cared about math, not politics. During my review of recent events, I encountered a proof that displayed exceptional insight. The student demonstrated an ability to reconstruct complex mathematical arguments from first principles, a rare skill at any level. Whispers rippled through the assembly. Students who had participated in Halverson's public humiliation attempt now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked down, avoiding eye contact. Others stared at Jalen with mixed emotions, shame, resentment, and something that looked like dawning respect. The competition committee has reviewed the submission, Dr. Chen continued, and extends an invitation to Jalen Brooks as a full competitor. The word full landed with precise weight. Not a diversity initiative, not a scholarship project, not a token gesture. Full competitor, because his work demanded it. From the side of the hall came a sharp sound, a chair scraping back. Dr. Halverson stood, his face tight with barely contained fury. Weeks of investigation had stripped away his polished veneer, revealing the desperation beneath. "This is highly irregular," he snapped. "The pressure of public competition will be documented." Ms. Reyes cut in smoothly, already writing in her notebook. Several students had their phones out too, recording. The days of deniable comments were over. Halverson's mouth twisted. "He'll embarrass himself," he said, loud enough to carry. "And the institution." Dr. Chen turned slowly, fixing him with a level stare. "That comment will be added to the ongoing inquiry file, Dr. Halverson. Would you like to elaborate on your concerns about a student's validated mathematical ability?" The silence that followed felt like a door closing. Halverson sat back down. But the damage was done. Another mask had slipped. Another moment of truth captured. Denise Brooks squeezed her son's hand. Her eyes shone with tears she wouldn't let fall. Not here, not where they could be misinterpreted. She still had overdue bills at home, still faced the grinding pressure of systems designed to exhaust families like theirs. But this moment felt like oxygen after too long underwater. Near the back, a student who had once moved desks to avoid Jalen now watched with something like wonder. Another whispered to a friend, "Did you see his proof? The one they tried to bury?" The story was changing shape. Not a scandal about belonging, but a revelation about excellence that couldn't be contained. The competition will be held at State University next month, Dr. Chen announced. All participants receive access to advanced training resources and faculty mentorship. Tasha leaned close to Jalen. "You're going to destroy them," she whispered, grinning. Jalen shook his head slightly. "I'm not doing this to prove I belong," he said quietly. "I'm doing it because I'm good." The distinction mattered. He wasn't asking for acceptance anymore. He was claiming space he'd earned through pure ability. The same ability that had solved an impossible problem in 5 minutes, that had exposed a celebrated professor's deception, that had turned institutional weapons into evidence of their own corruption. Rourke returned to the podium, holding a form with the school's letterhead. The competition roster submission. One simple document that they couldn't deny anymore. His signature looked shaky as he filled it out, each stroke a surrender to reality. Ms. Reyes collected the form, checking every field with careful attention. No detail would be left to chance, no loophole left open. She had watched too many talented students get erased by oversights and clerical errors. The assembly dispersed slowly, students lingering to witness this quiet revolution. A mathematics competition entry had become something larger, proof that excellence couldn't be buried, that truth had weight, that systems could be forced to bend toward justice when enough people refused to look away. The school board meeting room couldn't contain the crowd. People lined the walls, spilled into the hallway, and clustered around doorways. Local news cameras rolled in the back, their red lights blinking like patient eyes. The energy crackled, not with the usual bureaucratic tedium, but with the electric anticipation of justice about to land. Jalen sat between his mother and Ms. Reyes in the front row, his contest medal tucked quietly in his pocket. He didn't need to wear it. Everyone already knew. The regional mathematics competition had turned into more than a contest. It became the moment a lie collapsed under the weight of undeniable truth. Tasha sat nearby, phone ready, but not recording. Tonight wasn't about gathering evidence anymore. Tonight was about watching that evidence do its work. Mr. Vance had claimed his own seat, weathered hands folded over a folder of archived documents that had helped expose the pattern. Their lawyer, Alyssa Monroe, reviewed her notes with the focused calm of someone who knew they'd already won. Board President Sandra Walsh cleared her throat, shuffling papers at the main table. "Before we begin the public portion, we'll hear the findings of the external inquiry into recent events at Eldridge Collegiate Academy." Dr. Halverson sat stiffly in the back corner, his usual commanding presence deflated. Dean Rourke had chosen a middle seat, perhaps hoping to disappear into the crowd. Neither man looked at Jalen. The lead investigator, Dr. Marcus Reed, approached the podium. His voice carried the dry authority of someone who had seen through every excuse and found them wanting. Our investigation examined multiple serious allegations regarding academic integrity, retaliatory behavior, and abuse of institutional authority. The room settled into complete silence as he began reading from his report. Finding 1. Dr. Grant Halverson knowingly presented a solved mathematical case as an unsolved problem during a classroom demonstration. Documentation proves he had accessed published solutions through university archives prior to this incident. Denise grabbed Jalen's hand. This was only the first blow, but already Halverson's face had gone pale. Finding 2. When student Jalen Brooks correctly solved this problem and identified its true nature, Dr. Halvorsen initiated false academic integrity accusations as retaliation. Evidence shows these accusations were coordinated with other staff members through informal channels to create maximum pressure. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Disgraceful!" A camera shutter clicked rapidly. Finding 3. Grade manipulation occurred across multiple assignments following the initial incident. Statistical analysis shows a clear pattern of biased marking and selective enforcement against Mr. Brooks, coordinated through departmental complaints. Ms. Reyes nodded slightly. She had documented every instance, building the pattern piece by piece. Finding 4. Dean Colby Rourke enabled this suppression by refusing to examine evidence, fast-tracking punitive measures without due process, and retaliating against staff members who raised concerns. His actions directly contributed to financial hardship through unjustified scholarship suspension. Rourke seemed to shrink in his chair. The carefully maintained image of administrative authority had crumbled into something smaller and meaner. Dr. Reed continued with devastating precision. The investigation concludes that these actions represent serious misconduct, requiring immediate response. We recommend the following actions. He paused, letting the moment stretch. The room leaned forward. Dr. Halvorsen is to be permanently barred from all school district programs and events. His actions have been reported to relevant professional bodies for disciplinary review. Dean Rourke's position has been deemed untenable. His resignation is to be processed immediately. Whispers erupted around the room. This wasn't a gentle retirement or a quiet transfer. This was public consequence, landing hard and clear. Furthermore, Dr. Reed continued, Mr. Brooks's scholarship is to be fully reinstated with additional protections against future retaliation. All fees and costs incurred during the unjustified suspension must be reimbursed by the district. Denise's shoulders relaxed slightly. The financial pressure that had been crushing them would finally ease. Finally, in recognition of both the harm done and the exceptional abilities demonstrated, the board will establish a new Mathematics Excellence Initiative. This program will focus on identifying and supporting talented students from all backgrounds, with Mr. Brooks serving as its first student ambassador. The room burst into applause. Someone in the back shouted, "Well deserved." Dr. Reed stepped back, but Board President Walsh wasn't finished. I would like to add that Mr. Brooks's recent performance at the regional mathematics competition reflects the highest standards of academic excellence. His first-place finish, particularly his solutions in the advanced round, has brought significant positive attention to our district. More applause filled the room. Jalen remained composed, but his eyes showed quiet satisfaction. The same skills that Halvorsen had tried to dismiss had now become the school's proudest achievement. Tasha leaned forward to whisper, "They can't spin this anymore. Your excellence is the story now." Alyssa Monroe stood to address procedural details about the reimbursement process and new oversight measures. The legal language felt like locks clicking into place, securing the victory they'd fought so hard to win. When the meeting finally adjourned, the crowd moved slowly toward the exits, still buzzing with discussion. Reporters tried to catch quotes from board members, while community leaders shook hands with Jalen's supporters. Outside in the cool evening air, Denise pulled Jalen into a fierce hug. Tears ran down her face, but her laughter bubbled up. The pure joy of watching her son stand tall, while those who tried to break him fell. Jalen looked back at the building where it had all started, his voice steady and clear. "You tried to bury me. Now, I'm the headline. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.